in collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week we'll be discussing the price of electricity in Cyprus and why it's taking so long for reforms to be made.
In Cyprus, it is a big lobby from different groups of people who are not wishing to go forward with the reform of the energy sector.
Booster jabs are on the way for the over 65s, but are they necessary?
There is a four-fold reduction in possible infection and six-fold reduction in being hospitalized in comparison to those that received the 2 doses of the vaccine.
And we hear all about the street music project, which will pop up around the island.
Basically, the idea was to get outside the theatre and bring the music to the everyday life and to the city streets.
There's been much discussion recently about the price of electricity in Cyprus after bills went up some 38% in August. They are scheduled to drop very slightly according to the price of the fuel used to generate electricity in Cyprus. We're joined by the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Energy, Trade and Tourism. He is Kyriakos Hadjiyannis. Kyriakos, you had a meeting, I believe, earlier this week. What exactly did you decide? Because this has been rumbling on for years.
Yeah, we have received a number of complaints from electricity consumers. They complain that electricity prices have risen too much in recent times, actually in the last 2 months. The Cyprus Electricity Authority informed us yesterday that the increase are at the level of 2019. It also assures us that the bills in the next period, in the next 2 months, will be about 3% cheaper. The reasons for the increase are twofold. The first is in the increase in the price of fuel internationally. The second reason is the increase in the market for carbon dioxide emissions. The increase is due to the delay of the international transition to green energy. Cyprus paid in 2020, as of last year, 75 million euros to which the consumer pays. And the question is, what will be the prices in the near future? The answer is unfortunately not so good. International fuel and pollutant prices, or the price of the rights, will continue to rise. The answer here is that Cyprus should open up the electricity market. It will also have to complete the work of gas arrival. This project is expected to be completed at the end of 2022. At the same time, the production of energy with photovoltaic parks is progressing. Our committee will continue to discuss the issue and try to impose solutions that are fair to the consumer and are also fair prices and for the ecology.
Can I ask you about the fact that in 2014 the electricity market here was fully liberalised, but 7.5 years later we still have only the EAC providing electricity. That's the bottom line, isn't it? It's not a question of whether or not, I think as it was suggested, VAT should be reduced or anything like that. It's the fact that since there's no competition, then people can't choose their supplier.
That's right, it was a delay, and unfortunately until today we have this delay, and this delay is, it was paid from the consumer. And the strategy is there. The implementation, unfortunately, by different parameters of this strategy is not so good. And it was also another issue that was discussed.
But it's the Parliament that has been putting this on hold, because if we go back several years anyway, a draft bill was passed by Parliament postponing the denationalisation of the Electricity Authority until December 2017. That's several years ago now, and it's still not been passed. What's Parliament doing?
You are again right that, you know, in Cyprus it is a big lobby from different groups of people who are not wishing to go forward with the reform of the energy sector. And it was this also a big bureaucracy. Yesterday, for example, was one discussion why we have applications to produce electricity to photovoltaic plants with a power or with a dynamic of 700 megawatt. So, and they are waiting. They are in the list for waiting for so many times. Since a year, actually, they don't approve or they don't give answer to the applicant.
So who has to give that approval?
The Department of Environment from the Ministry of Agriculture. And unfortunately, this department is responsible also for the climatic change and also to improve the protection of the climate.
OK, but let's come back to the role of Parliament, since you are a parliamentarian and you sit on these committees. How can you explain the fact that all these years, pretty well as long as I've been in Cyprus, people have been complaining about their bills, and every new parliament says, yes, we must do something about it, and yet nothing's been done?
No, we do something now. I don't want to say that I am the chair of the committee since 2 or 3 months since the last election. This is not the right answer, but I have to say this. We continue. We have a bill now. Will be finished next week for the reform of the electricity sector. So, and the market will be open for everyone to produce and for everyone to choose the agreement who wish to do it or who wish to agree with between the producers and the demand side.
Well, that's good news, but we already, I think, have licensed several independent producers, and yet they're not producing. What's the role of SERA in all of this, the regulation authority?
It is also a delay. This is what I mean. They have also, it is a small number of applicants who have positive answer, but one other authority, they do not give the approval to go forward or to finish and to start with the implementation of the project.
All right, Kyriakos, you will forgive me for saying that it does seem that we're going around in circles on this.
Yeah, I accept the criticism, your criticism, but from the other side, we have our strategy. Unfortunately, we have many problems by the implementation of this strategy. We go forward, but the tempo is not so good. The main question is the frame of the law and the market. We have to open the market. So the electricity authority here in Cyprus, you know that they have the monopoly and they influence the whole development of the reform. And of course, from the other side, we need a lot of investments. There are another 2 applicants for creation or for production of electricity. In the near future, we are going to have 3 main producers of electricity with the classical form of production, also with fuel and mazout.
And that, of course, is another problem, because if we don't up the amount of renewable energy sources, we're going to pay bigger and bigger fines to the EU, aren't we?
Of course. You are right. The amount of renewable energy has to be increased in the next time. So it means that we have to move very quickly. And this is my purpose here in the Parliament, to start and to continue every week to solve many problems, many small problems, but because we have a lot of small problems, at the end of the day it became a big problem, and this is what I tried to solve.
Well, good luck with that, because it is something, as I say, that's been going on for years, and it takes political will. I hope the other parties are all on board with this. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Kyriakos Hadjiyannis, the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Energy, Trade and Tourism.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
News came out this week that booster jabs will be given to certain categories of people 5 or 6 months after their previous second vaccination. Who are those people? And indeed, what will the booster do? Because you've probably read some opinions that say it won't do very much. Peter Karayannis is a professor of microbiology and molecular virology at the University of Nicosia. Peter, booster jabs, I know they're going to be rolled out very shortly. Not all across the EU, though. Why have some countries decided that they are not going to be much good?
I think the reason there is countries which lag behind their immunizations programs. They rather concentrate on immunizing people who have not been immunized at all, rather than giving booster dose to the ones who have. Here in Cyprus, we're doing quite well. At the moment, the first dose vaccinees are well over 80% now, and we're nearing 78% for vaccinees who got both vaccines. So we're not doing bad at all with the percentages which we think are in a position to fight off the Delta variant. Now, data in Israel and the UK, in fact, indicates that as time goes by, the immunity wanes off. And in Israel in particular, where all the people received the Pfizer vaccine, no AstraZeneca at all there, they began to see these reduction in antibody levels after 3 months. That's why they made the decision to proceed with immunizations first over 50 years old, then they made it 40 years old, and last week they said 12 years old and above. So the evidence so far from Israel is that once you receive the third dose, then your antibody levels shoot up to very high levels indeed. And there is a 4-fold reduction in possible infection and 6-fold reduction in being hospitalized in comparison to those that received the 2 doses of the vaccine, not the unvaccinated ones. So the protection is quite good. And here in Cyprus, since we had some outbreaks in old people's homes who were vaccinated first, we got worried that we will have a problem come autumn and winter in these old people's homes, and of course in other people who, because of age, their immune system is not as virulent as it should be. That's why the government made the decision that the third dose will be offered to the over 65s, starting off with the people in old people's homes, then the immunosuppressed, because they're the ones who did not respond to the vaccine very well initially, and the immunosuppressed will get the vaccine irrespective of when they had their second shot. So they don't have to wait for 6 months like everybody else.
Do we know whether or not, come another 6 months, the booster will wane as well?
Well, we don't know that. I suspect not as quickly. And of course, it will all depend on what is circulating. If everybody around the world achieves this mythical, at the moment, 90-92% of immunity, we may not be troubled that much by the virus, other than in winter time, a bit like flu. But as long as there are countries in the world where the immunization coverage is extremely low, and if the virus in these countries is transmitted at the rate of knots, then the possibility of variants arising is increased, which will pose a problem to the Western countries with the higher vaccination rates.
Yes, especially if the vaccination doesn't respond the same way to the new variants.
Exactly. And we saw that a bit with the Delta variant, because we were saying with the Alpha variant, which is the British variant, that a 60-65% coverage would be sufficient. With the Delta variant, that went up to 80-85%. And, I'm saying now that we need to go 90, 92, 93% if we want to be absolutely sure that we will not have any problems from any variants that may arise in the future, particularly this new variant, which everybody is talking about at the moment. We don't have much information on this, but it first appeared in January of this year in Colombia. In Ecuador, it accounts for 30% of the cases there, but elsewhere in the world, it's very, very few cases, including the United Kingdom, and because it's been followed there by Public Health England, the situation, they don't appear at this point in time to be worried, and that's why the World Health Organization is regarding this variant as a variant of interest rather than a variant of concern.
Okay, why are people who had the Johnson & Johnson vaccine not needing or not getting a booster? What's the difference?
Well, this is not what I suggested to the minister when I raised this issue a long time ago, including the president. I said that the people who got the single shot of Johnson & Johnson should also be included. However, last week the company announced that if people who got the Johnson & Johnson got another shot of the Johnson & Johnson, then they had an 8-fold rise in antibody levels. So they may be thinking that as soon as that vaccine becomes available, they will give it to people who had the Johnson & Johnson.
Is the booster exactly the same as the number 1 and 2 vaccines, or is it a less heavy dose?
No, it's exactly the same vaccine, but you will only get one shot.
Before we go, I must ask you, there was in the paper this week news that several infants and children were quite seriously ill in our Makarios hospital with multi-system inflammatory syndrome, MISC. Now, that is sort of caused, I think, is it, by the coronavirus? Could you tell us more about that, because a couple of the kids were really quite seriously ill.
Yes, there are, I think, 3 children at the moment at the Makarios, and in fact, a 12-month-old baby is incubated at the moment because of this syndrome, which is caused by the coronavirus. And as the name implies, it causes an inflammatory reaction that affects multiple organs of the body. And unless, children receive appropriate treatment, then, they can run into difficulties.
What treatment do we have for something like that?
I'm not quite sure what the treatment entails. I'm not a pediatrician, but I gather that because it is an inflammatory reaction, then the treatment that they get, possibly with steroids, is to dampen down the immune system to stop attacking in a way its own body.
And the outcome generally is okay?
It's very good, yes. I mean, I was listening to the director of the ward where these children are being looked after, and he said that I think they've had so far about 12-15 cases over the last few months, and only one girl from the previous cases is still on the ward and is doing much better than she was a few weeks ago.
Well, that's good news, and it's always nice to end on good news. And I gather that paediatricians have been told to be on the lookout for symptoms that could possibly be MIS-C. Peter Karayannis from the University of Nicosia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
We're back on the culture trail again because a fascinating project is taking place between the 13th and the 22nd of September. The Cyprus Symphony Orchestra, under its Orchestra for All project, has launched the Street Music Project. To tell us all about it from the orchestra, we welcome Antonis Vargili. Antonis, this really got me excited because if I understood correctly, the members of the orchestra are going to be moving around the city, playing as they go or stopping in various places to play and then moving on. Tell us all about it.
Yes, basically the idea was to get outside the theatre and bring the music to the everyday life and to the city streets, to the people. And the idea was to create a pulse in the city to affect everyday life with music of all kinds of different genres. So the orchestra got split into small ensembles. Some were already playing together, some were formed with the opportunity provided by this project. And we also invited bands of the local music scene representing different genres, which brought it up to more than 80 musicians and more than 80 street performances in 10 days in all cities. And this is only the pilot project. Ideally, we can even expand from there.
Right, now when are these events going to take place? It's a bit warm to do it in the day. Is this an evening event?
It's more in the afternoon, yeah, because it's still, September is like extended August, so it's more in the afternoon, late afternoon, let's say.
And whereabouts will you be going?
Okay, so that's something that we don't want to completely give out because we want to preserve the street element. Street music is supposed to be something spontaneous and on the spot and has a bit of an element of surprise, so that we don't want to ruin that by turning it into an outdoors event. So we're not going to give away completely the locations and times, but let's say that it's in the main streets of the cities, and there will be a project map where you can actually, it's like an infographic that gives hints of the locations. But anyone can get the main streets of the cities where people are already strolling and walking around or sitting in cafes. So, to give you a few examples, pedestrian streets in Nicosia, we all know them. Finigoudes in Lavnaga, it's an obvious location, and that's a hint about where the locations will be.
And what about other cities?
Well, we have all four major cities, so Nicosia, Larnaca, Kalimazon, and Paphos. In Paphos, let's say that it will be in town of Paphos.
Okay, because people won't want to miss this, and so I presume that once you start, they'll at least be able to hear the music if they're nearby. But if it's starting in the afternoon, how long does each performance take?
Well, each group will be playing for about 3 hours. But the program will be much smaller, so let's say 30 to 40 minutes, so they will be looping it 3 or 4 times in every performance. So if somebody doesn't catch them when they start, they still have about 3 hours to listen to the whole program.
And will they stay in the same venue for those 3 hours, or will they play their 30 minutes and then go off somewhere nearby?
No, that's always in the same venue, but on the next day, the same group will be in a different venue.
Wow, it's going to take a lot of organising. Who's sort of done all the mapping and making sure that everybody can be where they're supposed to be?
Yeah, that's true. It's been a challenge for us as well because it's the first time we're doing something like this. So it took a lot of effort. We've been working on this for a few months already. So we hope that everything goes well.
And what sort of music? You mentioned that you're going to include musicians of other genre. So how are you mixing them in? Are they going to be playing with members of the symphony orchestra?
That's actually an idea we explored, and we are thinking about mingling the groups in the future. Let me just say that this is not a one-off project. This is a pilot. We already have it in the program for this season for 3 different periods. So September is the first, December is the second, and May is the third phase of the first season of the project. So in the future, we are exploring the idea of mingling the groups, but for now, for the start, we thought it would be a good idea to start as we feel more comfortable, because the ensembles are already playing together. So, yeah, about the genres, already the ensembles of the orchestra are not limiting themselves to only classical music. We have a lot of classical music in the ensembles of the orchestra, but not only. We also have tango, film music, rock music, traditional music already in the ensembles of the orchestra, and then we are adding to that with 3 jazz bands, 3 folk traditional ensembles, and 3 rock bands.
So there is something for everybody by the sound of it. Now, we said it's running from the 13th to the 22nd. Is that in all cities, or are some cities on the 13th and others on the 15th, 18th, whatever?
First day of the project already includes all 4 cities. So from that point on, it's more or less, we try to include every city and every day. Maybe on one of the days there's a city missing out, but more or less from the first to the last day of the project, it includes all 4 cities.
It sounds a bit like a sort of pop-up music festival in a way, but people will want to support you, I'm sure, and although you don't want to give it all away, has the Symphony Orchestra got a website with a few more details so they can think that's the day I will go downtown?
Yeah, you will be able to follow the project on our social media, on our Facebook page, so one can follow on there.
So if people look for the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra on Facebook, they're likely to find what they need to know?
Yeah, exactly.
It does sound very exciting. Is it the first time you've done something like this, Antoni?
Let's say it's the first time we are doing this in such a big scale. We've done some small pop-up performances 5 years ago, when we would pop up in different cafes and play half-an-hour programs. And the idea was the same, that it wasn't an event, it was a pop-up performance. People didn't know about it, they were just having their coffee, and suddenly they would see an ensemble playing music, and there was this interaction that we feel we can build on.
Yeah, I think it's when that sort of spontaneity is there, the fact that the people who happen to be there are rather surprised automatically seems to put them on your side in a way, doesn't it?
Well, yes, I guess, because it's much different than the theatre. In a theatre or any music venue, it's one experience, and it's really amazing. I mean, doing that by choice as an audience, going to the theatre to listen to music, you decide to spend some time from your life to witness live music and communicate both with the musicians, but also share with the rest of the audience in a very unique way. But street music, on the other hand, street music is part of the environment. It belongs to the location. It's attached to other experiences. It often brings out experiences. And on the spot, it may contrast the visual experience, a building or a monument. It may complement it or amplify its effects. And of course, what you said, that it's spontaneous and surprising, and that's really powerful. You can say that it's a bit invasive too, but in a good way.
I think I would call it a gift, and a rather lovely one at that, and it's coming to us from the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra between the 13th and 22nd of September. You need to check out their Facebook page, but it's happening in all the major cities, and you might be lucky to be in the right place at the right time when their music pops up. Antonis Bargili from the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra there telling us all about the Street Music Project. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.